Hey guys, welcome to another Horror Stories daily video. What I am doing with this series of videos is conducting a world tour. I am compiling and telling stories from every country on Earth, starting with Afghanistan and ending with Zimbabwe. So without further ado, let's delve into today's horror stories. And remember, the real monsters may be closer than you think. In the summer of 2008, nestled within the rugged landscapes of northern Albania, near the town of Shkoder, I encountered a terror that has clung to me tighter than my own shadow. My name is Liridon, and at the time, I was a 24-year-old university student, home for the summer holidays. I'm a man who has always been drawn to the solitude of nature, which in hindsight might have been my undoing. Our family home is a modest one, shadowed by the imposing Albanian Alps, a testament to both the beauty and isolation characteristic of this part of the world. It was in this setting, under the guise of tranquility, that something insidious found me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the peaks, casting long shadows through the valley, I decided to take a walk along a path I knew well, one that wound its way around the outskirts of the village and into the dense forests beyond. The air was cool, carrying whispers of the coming night, whispers that, unbeknownst to me, were laden with warnings. As twilight deepened, I realized how far I'd ventured. The familiar path now seemed alien, twisted by the shadows of night. It was then I heard it. A melody, distant and haunting, a woman's voice singing in an old Albanian dialect. The song was both beautiful and sad, imbued with a longing that felt almost tangible. Curiosity, laced with an inexplicable dread, propelled me forward. I moved off the path, drawn toward the source of the singing. The forest seemed to close in around me, branches reaching out like hands trying to grasp at the fabric of my jacket. The melody grew louder, more insistent, until suddenly it stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. I found myself in a clearing, bathed in moonlight, facing an old, decrepit well. The air was thick with the scent of moss and decay. It was then I saw her, a figure, ethereal and pale, draped in garments that seemed to whisper of a bygone era. Her eyes, dark voids in the moonlight, locked onto mine, and in that moment, I felt an icy chill seize my heart. She spoke, her voice a mix of sorrow and rage, telling me of her life, centuries past, when she was wronged by those she trusted, her body consigned to the dark waters of the well before me. Her tale was one of betrayal and unspeakable cruelty, a narrative that seemed to seep into my very bones. The urge to flee was overwhelming, yet I was rooted to the spot. She moved closer, her hand reaching out to mine, her touch cold as the grave. She whispered a plea for release, for justice, for her story to be known. I awoke the next morning at the edge of the clearing, the dawn light gentle on my face. The well, however, was nowhere to be seen. Had it been a dream? A figment of my imagination fueled by the isolation of the forest? I couldn't tell. I shared my experience with the elders of the village, only to be met with knowing looks. They spoke of an ancient tragedy, of a young woman betrayed, her existence erased from history, her spirit restless and seeking solace. Since that night, I've been haunted not by fear, but by a profound sadness, a connection to a soul lost in the echoes of time. My encounter in the forests of Albania has left me with more questions than answers, a reminder of the thin veil that separates the known from the unknowable. To this day, the melody I heard in the forest lingers in my ears, a haunting lullaby that reminds me of the encounter that summer night, where reality and myth entwined to reveal a story of loss and longing, forever imprinted on the landscape of my homeland and the fabric of my soul. In the shadowed heart of Albania, where the echoes of the past linger in the air like a dense fog, my tale unfolds. It was the autumn of 2015, and I, Clara, was a 22-year-old university student from Tirana, engrossed in the study of Albanian folklore. My quest for authentic stories led me to a remote village in the mountains, a place where the modern world seemed to have hesitated at the borders, leaving tradition and superstition to fill the air like the smoke from wood fires. The village, nestled within a crook of the Albanian Alps, was a tapestry of ancient stone houses and cobbled paths, each turn revealing another piece of history preserved in time. The locals spoke of a haunted hush that descended with the fall, whispering tales that danced on the line between the real and the ethereal. It was here, in this isolated haven, that I encountered a narrative that would forever alter the fabric of my reality. I was invited into the home of an elderly woman, renowned for her knowledge of the village's lore. Her eyes, clouded with age, seemed to pierce through the veils of time as she recounted the story of the Ikenget Inates, the night singers. These were not the benevolent spirits sung of in lullabies to children. They were phantoms of vengeance and sorrow, condemned to wander the mountain paths, their lamentations for lost lives leading unwary travelers astray. Driven by a blend of skepticism and intrigue, I resolved to walk the paths that night, under a moon veiled by scudding clouds, hoping to discern the truth behind the tales. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a recorder, I set out into the night, the silence enveloping me like a cloak. It wasn't long before the air around me began to thicken, a fog rolling in as if summoned by the very spirits I sought. Then, the singing began, a chorus of voices, ethereal and mournful, rising and falling with the wind. The sound seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, a symphony of despair that tugged at the edges of my soul. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I followed the voices, my heart pounding in my chest, until I found myself at the edge of a chasm, hidden by the dense fog. The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by a single voice that whispered my name, drawing me closer to the precipice. In that moment, terror took hold, a realization dawning that these spirits sought not to be heard, but to be joined. I stumbled backward, the ground beneath my feet giving way as I fell, the air knocked from my lungs. I awoke to the touch of the morning sun, my body bruised, but intact, lying at the base of the chasm on a narrow ledge. The fall had been broken by an outcrop of trees, sparing me from a fate akin to those I had sought. With great difficulty, I made my way back to the village, a profound sense of relief washing over me as the first houses came into view. The villagers listened to my tale with solemn faces, nodding in silent acknowledgement of the truth I had barely escaped. It was a truth that bound them to this land, a pact of silence and survival, steeped in the knowledge that some mysteries should remain undisturbed. Since that night, the line between the known and the unknown has blurred for me. The voices of the night singers a constant whisper at the edge of consciousness, a reminder of the night I walked with phantoms and lived to tell the tale. My journey into the heart of Albania's folklore revealed a world where the past is not dead, but sleeps, waiting for the unwary to listen a little too closely. It was the fall of 2016, and I was in my late 20s, a time when the allure of adventure still had a firm grip on my spirit. My name is Erjan, a man with a thirst for the unknown and the mysteries that lay hidden in the folds of the earth. My journey took me to the heart of Albania, to a small, seemingly forgotten village nestled in the mountains that time had passed by. This village, with its stone houses covered in ivy and streets that whispered of history, was to be the backdrop of an experience that would forever haunt the corners of my mind. I had come to explore the ancient ruins that lay on the outskirts of the village, remnants of a civilization long gone, but whose presence still lingered in the air like a forgotten breath. The locals spoke of these ruins with a reverence tinged with fear, warning of spirits that guarded the stones and did not take kindly to intruders. I, fueled by a blend of skepticism and curiosity, paid little heed to these warnings, dismissing them as the superstitions of a bygone era. On the day I set out to explore the ruins, the sky was a canvas of gray, the sun a faint memory behind the clouds. The air was chilled, carrying the scent of impending rain. I trekked through the dense forest that surrounded the village, the silence around me so profound it felt almost oppressive, as if the land itself was holding its breath. As I approached the ruins, a sense of unease began to take root within me, a feeling that I was not alone. I told myself it was just the wind, the rustle of leaves, the natural sounds of the wilderness. But then, I heard it, a whisper, so faint I thought I had imagined it. It was followed by another, then another, until the air was filled with whispers that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the ruins. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, the result of the eerie atmosphere and the local tales playing tricks on my mind. Determined to prove to myself that there was nothing to fear, I continued my exploration. That's when I saw her, a figure, draped in white, her face obscured by the shadow of the hood she wore. She seemed to glide over the ground, her presence surreal against the backdrop of the crumbling stones. My heart raced, a mixture of fear and fascination pinning me to the spot. I called out to her, my voice sounding foreign in the oppressive silence, but she did not respond. Instead, she turned slowly, facing me, and as she lifted her head, I saw that where her face should have been, there was only darkness, an abyss that seemed to pull at my very soul. I stumbled backward, my mind screaming for me to flee, but my body refused to obey. It was then that the rain began to fall, a torrential downpour that seemed to arise out of nowhere. The figure vanished, as if she had never been there, leaving me alone amidst the ruins, the whispers silenced by the sound of the rain. I returned to the village, soaked and shaken, my mind grappling with what I had seen. The villagers saw the look in my eyes and knew without asking that I had encountered the guardian of the ruins, the spirit of a woman wronged long ago, condemned to wander the land for eternity. I left the village the next day, the memory of my experience etched into my mind. The logical part of me tries to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination fueled by the atmosphere and the local legends. But deep down, I know what I saw was real, a glimpse into a world beyond our understanding, a world that exists alongside ours, hidden in the shadows of history and superstition. To this day, the sound of whispers in the silence, the sight of ruins, even the fall of rain, takes me back to that moment, a reminder of the time I came face to face with the unknown in the mountains of Albania. In the early spring of 2019, I found myself wandering the rugged landscapes of northern Albania, far from the bustling streets of Tirana, where I had spent most of my life. My name is Ardit, a 28-year-old man with an insatiable curiosity for the tales that are whispered in the shadows of my country's mountains. This curiosity, however, would soon lead me down a path that I could never have anticipated, into a realm where the boundary between the living and the dead seemed to blur. I had heard stories of a small, almost forgotten village named Zal, nestled within the confines of the Albanian Alps. It was said that the village was home to an ancient well, around which numerous unexplainable disappearances had occurred over the centuries. The locals avoided it, believing the well to be cursed, a gateway to the underworld. Driven by a mixture of skepticism and thrill-seeking, I decided to visit Zal and see this well for myself. Upon my arrival, I was met with a cold silence from the villagers, who regarded me with a mixture of suspicion and pity. It was as if my fate was already known to them, an unwelcome outsider drawn by the allure of their darkest legend. Undeterred, I inquired about the location of the well, only to be met with vague directions and warnings to steer clear of it, especially as dusk approached. Ignoring their warnings, I found the well just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. It was an ancient structure, stones worn by the passage of time, covered in moss and ivy. The air around it felt unnaturally cold, and as I approached, a sense of dread began to gnaw at my insides. I peered into the darkness of the well, and for a moment, I thought I heard a whisper, a voice so faint that I convinced myself it was just the wind. I took out my phone to take a picture, and that's when I heard it again, clearer this time, a soft plea for help echoing from the depths below. My blood ran cold, the rational part of my mind battling with the primal fear that had taken hold. Compelled by a desire to help, or perhaps by the sheer impossibility of the situation, I looked around for something to lower into the well. Finding a length of rope nearby as if left for this very purpose, I tied it to a sturdy branch and began my descent into the abyss. The further down I went, the colder it became, until the darkness enveloped me completely. The whispering grew louder, now a chorus of voices, all pleading for release, for salvation. Panic set in as I realized the voices did not belong to the living, but to the souls of those who had disappeared, trapped in the liminal space between worlds. In my terror, I lost my grip on the rope, falling into the icy water below. The shock of the cold was like 1,000 needles piercing my skin, and as I struggled to the surface, the whispering ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. I managed to climb out of the well, my body shaking uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the realization of what I had experienced. The well was not just a structure of stone and water. It was a prison for lost souls, a place of unspeakable sorrow. I left Zal that night, driven by an instinctual fear that overpowered my curiosity. The villagers watched me go, their eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and sorrow, as if they had seen the outcome of my journey long before I had embarked upon it. To this day, I cannot explain what happened at the well of Zal. I have tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a hallucination brought on by fear and the power of suggestion. But deep down, I know what I heard, what I felt in the depths of that ancient well. It was a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the mysteries that lie beyond, and a warning that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. In the fall of 2020, during a time when the world seemed to hold its breath amidst the chaos of a global pandemic, I sought solace in the solitude of the Albanian countryside. My name is Genti, a 30-year-old man with an unquenchable thirst for the mysteries that lurk within the forgotten corners of my homeland. This tale unfolds in the shadow of the Timor Mountains, a place where ancient legends breathe life into the dense, whispering forests, and the air carries the scent of secrets long buried. I had taken it upon myself to explore the less traveled paths, to document the untold stories of the land. It was on one such expedition, camera in hand, that I stumbled upon a village that was not marked on any map I had consulted. It was as if the village had been intentionally hidden, shielded from the prying eyes of the modern world. The villagers were wary of my presence, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and caution. I introduced myself, explaining my intent to capture the essence of Albania's hidden beauty through my lens. It was then that an elderly man, his face carved with the lines of a hard-lived life, beckoned me closer. He spoke of a place that the villagers dared not visit, an ancient grove that lay beyond the edge of the village, where the trees were said to be alive, whispering secrets of the dead in the dead of night. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, I thanked the man and made my way to the grove as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of fire. The forest greeted me with an eerie silence, the kind that amplifies the smallest of sounds, making my own footsteps seem like an intrusion upon sacred ground. As nightfall embraced the land, I began to hear it, the faintest whisper of voices, so soft that I might have dismissed them as the rustling of leaves were it not for the distinct cadence of human speech. I raised my camera, the flash slicing through the darkness, capturing stills of the grove that seemed unnaturally still, as if the very air was holding its breath. The whispers grew louder, urgent, as if the trees themselves were speaking to me. I could not understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable, pleading, desperate. A chill crawled down my spine, the realization dawning on me that I was not alone. The light from my camera seemed to provoke whatever spirits lingered in the grove, the darkness coalescing into shapes that were all too human. I stumbled back, my heart racing as fear took hold, every instinct screaming for me to flee. But it was as if the forest itself had come alive, the trees shifting, narrowing the path, their branches clawing at my clothes, trying to hold me back. It was then that I saw her, a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, her features obscured by the darkness, but her eyes burned with an otherworldly light. She spoke, her voice echoing through the grove, a warning to leave and never return, to forget the secrets that lay buried in this place. I ran, not stopping until the lights of the village pierced the darkness, the sounds of the grove fading into the night. The villagers found me at the edge of the forest, my clothes torn, my face pale with terror. They said nothing, but their eyes spoke volumes, of pity, of fear, of warnings unheeded. I left the village the next morning, my camera filled with photos that I dare not develop, for fear of what they might reveal. The experience haunts me still, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that dwell in the heart of Albania, waiting in the silence for those foolish enough to seek them out. It was the year 2017, a year that would forever be etched into my memory with a sharpness that time could never dull. My name is Besnik, a 27-year-old man who had returned to my homeland of Albania after several years abroad. I was drawn back not by the allure of home, but by the magnetic pull of the unknown that seemed to saturate the very air of the country's remote regions. I found myself in the northern reaches of Albania, in a region where the mountains stretch upwards to touch the sky, shrouded in mists and secrets. This story begins in a small, almost forgotten village near the border, a place where ancient traditions hold sway, and the modern world feels like a distant, hazy dream. The villagers spoke of a path that led deep into the heart of the mountains, a path that was said to be cursed. They told tales of those who walked this path and were never seen again, swallowed by the fog that clung to the mountain like a living thing. Driven by a mixture of disbelief and an insatiable curiosity, I decided to walk the path. It was a decision born of arrogance, a belief that I could defy the superstitions that had held sway over the region for generations. I set out at dawn, the first light of day casting long shadows across the landscape. The path was narrow, winding its way through dense forests, where the light struggled to penetrate the canopy of leaves above. The air grew colder as I ascended, the silence of the forest punctuated only by the sound of my footsteps and the occasional distant call of a bird. As I ventured deeper into the mountains, a thick fog began to roll in, obscuring the path ahead. It was an unnatural fog, dense and suffocating, and within it, I began to hear whispers. They were faint at first, so soft I could have dismissed them as the wind if not for the unmistakable sound of my name being called. Besnik, Besnik. The voices seemed to come from all around me, echoing through the fog in a chorus of whispers that grew louder with each step I took. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But then I saw them, shapes in the fog, human in form, but distorted, shifting, as if not fully of this world. I felt a deep, primal fear take root in my chest, a realization that I was not alone on this path. The shapes moved closer, the whispers growing more insistent, and in a moment of panic, I ran. I ran without direction, the fog disorienting me, turning the familiar path into a maze from which there seemed to be no escape. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I stumbled out of the fog, falling to my knees on the ground, gasping for breath. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the mountains, the fog behind me now, appearing calm and innocuous. I made my way back to the village, not once looking back, the whispers still echoing in my ears. The villagers didn't seem surprised to see me return, their eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and sorrow. They spoke no more of the path, but their silence spoke volumes, a tacit acknowledgement of the truth I had experienced. Since that day, I have not ventured back into the mountains, nor have I sought to unravel the mysteries that lie hidden within the fog. Some truths, I have come to realize, are better left undiscovered, for there are things in this world that defy explanation, bound to the land by ancient and unknowable forces. My experience on the cursed path of the Albanian mountains has left me with a profound respect for the unknown, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from that which lies beyond, forever lurking in the shadows, whispered by the fog. In late autumn of 2014, the crisp air weaving through the Albanian countryside was beginning to bite, foretelling the approach of winter. I was a 26-year-old woman named Enkeleda, teaching English in a small, mountain-encircled village near Korsha, far from the coastal warmth of Sarandea where I grew up. My adventure into teaching had led me here, to a place where legends felt as real as the stones underfoot, and the past seemed to whisper with the wind. The village was quaint, encapsulated in time, with traditions as old as the mountains themselves. My fascination with Albanian folklore had drawn me to this region, where stories of spirits and specters were as common as the bread shared at the dinner table. It was here, in this isolated haven, that I stumbled upon a tale that would etch itself into my very soul. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, casting the valley into shades of twilight, an elderly woman named Afrodita shared with me the story of the shadowed path. It was a trail not marked by signs, but by warnings, whispered from generation to generation, a path that led through the dense forest and supposedly to an ancient, forgotten village. It was said that those who ventured down this path were never seen again, swallowed by the shadows, claimed by the specters of the past. Driven by a mixture of skepticism and an insatiable curiosity, I decided to seek out this shadowed path. My intention was not to find the village, but to capture the essence of the tale in photographs, to document the intersection of nature and legend. I set out one morning under a sky heavy with clouds, the air sharp with the scent of impending rain. The path, concealed by overgrowth, was barely discernible, but I felt a pull, an inexplicable draw that guided my steps deeper into the forest. As I ventured further, the light began to dim, obscured by the thick canopy above, until it felt like twilight despite the morning hour. An oppressive silence enveloped the forest, broken only by the occasional crack of a twig underfoot, a sound that seemed to echo unnaturally in the still air. I pressed on, driven by a mixture of determination and the adrenaline that fear had begun to stir in my veins. That's when I first heard it. A soft whisper, like leaves rustling, but with a cadence that suggested speech. I paused, listening, but the sound faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving me questioning whether I'd heard it at all. The path eventually led to a clearing, where the remains of the ancient village lay. Stone foundations, overgrown with moss and ivy, were all that remained, a testament to a community that had once thrived and now was forgotten by all but the forest. As I explored the ruins, the sense of being watched grew overwhelming, the air charged with a palpable tension. I raised my camera, the lens focusing on the remains of what might have been a home, when I felt a cold breath on my neck, a whisper that formed words I couldn't understand, yet filled me with an undeniable urge to flee. I turned, but there was no one there, just the empty clearing and the ruins that seemed to mourn their own forgotten history. The whispering continued, growing louder, a chorus of voices that seemed to emanate from the very stones and earth. Panic took hold, and I ran, stumbling through the forest, the path now a blur beneath my feet. The voices followed, a haunting melody that seemed both a warning and a lament. I emerged from the forest as the first drops of rain began to fall, the village in sight, the shadowed path behind me, but its presence still clinging like a shroud. I never went back, nor did I speak of what happened, the photographs forgotten in my haste to leave. The experience remains with me, a memory as vivid as if it were yesterday. I cannot explain what I heard or felt that day, whether it was the whisper of the past or the voices of those claimed by the shadowed path, but I learned a profound respect for the tales of the village, reminders of a world beyond our understanding, where the boundary between legend and reality is as thin as the mist that rises from the mountains of Albania. And there we have it, folks. Our journey through the shadows and into the chilling depths of human nature has come to an end. I hope these tales have sent shivers down your spine, made you glance over your shoulder, or even question the ordinary moments of your daily lives. If you've enjoyed this exploration into the darker side of the human psyche, please don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. You can always share your thoughts, feelings, or even your own creepy experiences in the comments below. We love hearing from our listeners. And if you're new here or haven't yet joined our Horror Stories family, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our future tales of the macabre and mysterious. Until next time, stay safe, keep the lights on, and remember, the real monsters might be closer than you think.